So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. This bike, it started off in a couple parts. In 1997, I went and bought everything that a buddy of mine had for sale in his garage. So I get there, the entire floor is covered in Evolution, some shovel head parts, and this frame, a set of engine cases for a 53 Pan, and a set of heads. And in order to get those three parts, I had to buy everything. So I bought it all at the time, $2,500. Throughout the course of the next year, I sold off all those parts and got the frame, the cases, and heads for free. That was the cheap part. Over the next 22 years, I looked locally mostly and found the majority of the bike in pieces here, pieces there. The farthest I had to go for any parts was Saskatoon for the 1953 hand shift tanks. And in 53 you could have had a foot shift or hand shift. Okay. Off the soccer. So after collecting a whole bunch of parts for this bike, I sent off everything to my painter here, Dan Hope, and he did a phenomenal job. He replaced the sides, the flooring on the sidecar. He rebuilt the back fender, rebuilt the tanks. Everything was pretty rough, and he did a phenomenal job. One of the things about a project that's this long is the stories. Every single part, I can almost tell you where I got it, how much I paid for it, and what the circumstance was. In the case of the sidecar, I got a call from a fellow Antique Motorcycle Club of Manitoba member because he knew I've been looking for a steel body sidecar, Harley sidecar, for a lot of years. And they don't exist around here. So he calls me up and he's like, "Are you still looking for a sidecar?" And I'm, "Yeah." "Well, call this guy right now because he's about to list one on the local Kijiji or Craigslist kind of a site." I called him up and he turned out he was about a mile away from me. He had this sidecar. He had bought it in the early 80s, stripped it, and had it sitting in his basement for something like 25 years. And all complete, ex-Winnipeg Police Department bike, sidecar. And I was so happy to go and get it. It was just right there. And it was reasonably priced. And it was a good day. If you're wondering why it takes 22 years to build this, it's because I took my time on it. Just, let the parts come to me. And a lot of times they came in pretty rough. So you can see in this picture, I had an original front fender emblem or front fender trim, and it was rough. It was beat up. I had bought an aftermarket one. It didn't fit even close. So what I had to do is rebuild the original and straighten it, get all the scratches out, and then repolish it. But even after it had been in an accident, after it had been, distorted heavily, it still fit better after I was done than an aftermarket one. So finding original parts is critical for just a better build and fitment. The amount of things I learned building this bike is endless. I learned how to lace and true wheels, rebuild star hubs, just learned what goes on a 53 Harley as opposed to a 54, a 52, a 58. There's so many pieces that make up these bikes that you have to do so much research, and I enjoy that. I enjoy learning about these bikes. And the weird part about this bike is the day I got it, the day I started it, I knew what I wanted. And at the time I was into choppers, heavy, but I knew I wanted an original bike and I wanted a sidecar. It was almost instantaneous. I looked at that frame, I looked at those cases and said, I want a hand shift with a hand shift panhead with a sidecar. And that's why it took 22 years. When you're building a bike like this, what you have to do is surround yourself with good people. People who want to do the best work they can. In the case of my painter, I chose Dan Hope. He is a phenomenal painter and bodywork guy. I chose Jim Forrest, Frosty's Motorcycles in Estevan, Saskatchewan for the motor rebuild because his attention to detail is unbelievable. He really took a lot of time, a lot of pride in building this motor. He really wanted to see it through. He wanted to see this bike. He built this motor to ride. I chose Rana Innovative for my innovative cycle in Winnipeg to do my transmission. Again, attention to detail, second to none. Great guy, real shovel head and panhead kind of a guy. I chose Bob over at House of Silver, who did all my chrome back in the day before he passed away. It was all these people that you have to surround yourself with so that the end result of that bike is what you dream of and what you're aspiring to. What was nice about the motor rebuild was I sent all these parts off to Frosty. I gave him, extra heads and extra barrels and all these extra parts. Just, pick the best of everything. And he did it. He did a phenomenal job. And what was nice, though, is he has a running stand. So after the motor was completely rebuilt, he puts it on this stand and he does heat cycles on it. He runs it. He dials it in. He tunes it. And when I got it back, I literally just dropped it into the frame and it was ready to go. He'd all retorqued everything again because you need to do all this. So it was just nice to have something that you didn't have to play around with. You didn't have to wonder, did I get the timing right? Is the carb set? It was all done. So you can see we're pulling the bike out of my house. This is very early spring, and I build my bikes in the winter in my basement shop. So then we pulled it out. Now it's time to finish it. Now it's time to put the motor in, get all these little pieces done, and hook up the sidecar to it. This was about 6 weeks before our local World of Wheels, and I hammered down on this bike and finished it in time so that we could display it at our local show, World of Wheels. Weird part about this bike is I started when I was like a 25-year-old kid and finished as like a 46-year-old man. It came with me through all of life's ups and downs, and it was the constant. It was always that bike that I was going to finish. Even though I had a lot of naysayers, a lot of people looked at me and going, what the hell do you know about, restoring an old bike like this? And the truth is I didn't know nothing. But this is all about the learning process. It's all about, what you want and what you have to do to accomplish this. I learned a lot on this bike, and it shows that if you put your mind to it, you put the effort in, you can accomplish anything. Don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of things I had to work through on this bike. Nothing came in perfect. Everything needed work. Everything required attention. But that's why it was affordable for me at the time. And that's what allowed me to learn was fixing these parts, rebuilding them, and in the end, getting exactly what I wanted. And what I wanted was a bike that I could enjoy with my son. a bike I can take him riding all over. And we do ride this bike a lot. It was a lot of fun. I picked him up from his first day of kindergarten in this bike, and I mean, he felt like he was the queen, waving to everyone, and it was quite the day. We toured around, stopped at my brother's shop, and he had a lot of fun. To say that this bike gets looks is an understatement. It's there isn't a lot of these kind of bikes riding around in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Early Harleys or mid 50s Harleys with sidecars. I mean, there's only a handful of sidecars around, and none of this vintage with an original bike next to it. So it does draw a lot of attention. We've put in quite a few shows and always done very well. The whole point though is we ride them, we enjoy them, because that's what they're for. Taking them out, having a good time with them, experiencing life. This bike is a 1953 Harley, 74 cubic inch motor with a 4-speed transmission. You could have an option of 3-speed with reverse, but this thing moves so easy and rolls around so easy, you don't need it. It's upgraded to a 12-volt system, so the lights are better. It's a rigid rear frame with a pogo seat with springs inside. And the sidecar has leaf spring suspension. What do you got there, Waylon?
My wallet, some meat, and tons of juice boxes and strawberries.
Oh yeah, that's for today? Always got to have snacks, right? Presently, the bike cruises at 55 miles an hour. We're going to change the front sprocket on the motor, and hopefully that'll give us about a 65, 70 miles an hour, because this thing handles just beautifully down the highway. It's got 2-inch over fork tubes, which helps with the tracking, which helps with the rake and trail. It just allows a better handling down the highway. And it's got a lot of power, so it'll pull us along quite easily. This bike's a hand shift foot clutch, and it's a lot of fun to ride. Here we are at the baseball diamonds in Winnipeg, and such a fun day. Always memorable riding this bike, anywhere you go.